Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We'll just wait for a couple more minutes for people to join and then we can start. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We'll just wait for a couple more minutes. Advice or you want us to improve further, you can always type in our chat box or talk to us later. Okay, so a brief introduction before I move on to the webinar session. So I'm Payel Das, like I said. So I did my PhD in cell and developmental biology from University Hospital of Frederick Alexander University in Erlangen and Germany. After that, I did a 6-month postdoctoral stint in the same institute before moving into industry. So currently I work as a scientist in one of the R&Ds in Bengaluru. So without further delay, I would just share my screen. Can everyone see the screen? Somebody has to say a yes or a no.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll go to the presentation mode. So we are here to talk about the art of emailing. Before talking about it, let us first go through some house rules. So the webinar is about 30 minutes long, followed by a Q&A session. You are requested to keep yourself mute at all times during the presentation for people who have joined through Google Meet. For people who are on YouTube Live, you can always type your messages or questions in the chat box. We'll take it up later. Uh, Kindly stick to the topic and play here while asking questions. Please don't digress too much. A feedback form will be circulated to the registered participants at the end of this session. We kindly request you to fill this form. In case we run out of time and can't take your question, you can always write to us at phdsofIndia@gmail.com, and we'll definitely come back to you answering your queries. Right? Okay. So let's move on to the first topic as to who you can email or where email works or where it doesn't work. So for the US, usually, both master's and PhD applications are done through the graduate programs. There is no provision of writing an email to a professor who would reply to you and you will get an call and join. Okay, so that doesn't usually happen in the US. You have to apply through a graduate program. It's only after you spend 1 year in the graduate program of that institute that you can email professors, rotate in their laboratories if you are in the science stream, and then you can choose to join them. However, for UK, it is usually preferred that you email the professor before you apply through the graduate program. Your selection will be based upon that emailing because it plays an important role when the graduate program is making a decision. You have to apply to the graduate program, but it is always preferred that you email your potential supervisors or the labs that you want to join before you apply through the graduate program. Now, the decision of selection, however, lies with the graduate school. But if you have emailed someone, it might help in your selection process as well. However, it is very project specific, so you have to mention what project or what group exactly you want to join when you are emailing, as well as when you are applying through the graduate school. Next, other parts of Europe, which is primarily Germany, but it also works for Italy, Spain, France. So here, emails can do wonders, actually. So emails can get you interview calls, and eventually you can be selected into a PhD program. And this necessarily does not have to be through a graduate school. It can solely depend on the supervisor. If he or she is interested in taking you, if they have a scholar, if they have funding, and you are good enough and they like you in the interview, you will get selected. That's how actually I got my PhD position also. So I know this works, this will work. However, for masters, if you're applying for a master's program, this doesn't hold. You have to go through a graduate program in that case. And after you join the masters, again, just like USA, you can apply, you can write to the professors that you are interested to work with them, and then maybe you can get a chance. Yeah. So however, here the decision, the advantage of Germany primarily is that the decision of your selection lies with the supervisor. So you only have to impress your potential supervisor and you might get through the program. Okay. So moving on, India. So that's where we belong. So in India, emails usually do not work. It's again through graduate school or through nationwide scholarships like DBT, NET, etc., as you all know. However, email might work if you're applying for a research assistantship positions or internships, but it also varies from lab to lab, from institute to institute, if they have funding. However, you can have an advantage in case you have a funding, but you are not applying for a PhD position, but for an internship or a RA-ship. So that can work in your favor and you can get through those kinds of positions as well. Now, moving on, the first and foremost which you need to remember always is that generic emails, particularly which contain a lot of grammar errors and typos, are red flags. So, people, the supervisor, do not read these emails. I can tell you that because this was something that my PhD supervisor had told me when I had applied to his lab. So generic emails are a complete no-no. Supervisors understand when it is a generic email. So try to curate your emails as much as possible depending on where you are applying to. So now what is exactly the structure of a good email, how it should proceed or what you should follow? The first is always the introduction, where you basically tell your name, of course, your current designation and the institute you belong to. And in a very short, not more than 2 lines, you should mention why you are writing that email, what got you interested, whether it can be an advertisement that you saw for an open position. So you should mention that this was the advertisement that you saw and you are interested to join him as a PhD student or as an intern or as an RA-ship or as a postdoc, so on and so forth. Okay, so but your introduction should be short and crisp. It should not exceed more than 2 lines. Next is the body, which is the most important part of a good email. So here you need to talk about specificities. You need to mention about your specific interest in the field. That is why you got interested in the field. You have to mention what your acquired skill set is if you have that kind of a skill set. If you're applying for an internship or if you're a fresher just out of bachelor's or a master's program, you might not have a lot of skill set that labs look for. In that case, you can at least talk about what is your specific interest, why you got interested in that subject, and how the group that you are applying to fulfills or resonates with your area of interest. Now, it is very important if you have experience that you mention the connection with your past or current research experiences with what the research group is doing. That is your contribution according to you. I'll elaborate on this later in the subsequent slides, but it is important that you tell the person or the supervisor that you are applying to that what exactly is the connection. How is your current work experience resonate or align with what they are doing? Next is the concluding remarks. Here, you should mention what your future goals are. You don't have to talk about your 10-year plan or 20-year plan or whatever. You don't have to say that you want to become a professor or so. You can just say that you want to be a good scientist or you want to be a good researcher. So at least 2 or 3 years plan what you see in your immediate future, that goal, and how that institute or that particular research group might help you achieve that. This is quite important. It doesn't need to be a complete story, but you should mention again in not more than 2 to 3 lines how your future goals might be achieved if you join that institute or if you join that particular research group. And always attach your CV, even if it is not asked for. Sometimes people say if you get a reply back, then you send the CV, cover letter, research proposal, etc. But it is always good if you actually attach your CV in the first email itself. Most often people do not read the email, but they might open the CV, and it should contain what they are looking for or what the job description suggests. And of course, you should remember your CV or your resume should not be 5 to 10 pages long. Please don't write such a long CV. Try to concise it within 2 pages. It's best if you can concise it within 1 page, which talks about just the key points. But if it is not possible, you can also do it 2 pages, but not more than 2 pages. So, next, coming to the do's and don'ts, the absolute don'ts, basically. So, do not copy paste emails. Professors understand that if you copy paste emails, again, the generic emails, and especially do not copy paste emails if you are writing to multiple supervisors from the same department or institute. These people talk to each other. So do not try to do that. Please don't do this. Okay, so now emails should not be long essays. Like I said, nobody has time to read long paragraphs. So try to be as concise and crisp as possible. Only mention what is important. You have to mention who you are, like I mentioned before. You have to mention why you are interested in the position. You have to ensure you mention what your specific skill sets are and how those skill sets align with what the research group does, and your future goals, along with attachment of the CV. Next, usually introduction and the conclusion are constant. It's only the body that is variable, because that needs to be curated according to what you are applying for, the research group that you're applying to, and so on. So when applying for a PhD position specifically, it is very good, it is actually beneficial if you can mention at least 1 or 2 papers that the group has published. You can just read the abstract, the introduction, and the conclusion. You don't have to read line by line. But if you read about the papers, if you try to understand the paper and talk about those papers in the email, it shows that you are genuinely interested in joining the group. It shows your ability to think, ability to read, as well as talk about it in a scientific or in a conclusive manner. So next, do not explain in details the techniques you are aware of. So there will be a lot of techniques that the research group is doing, which you are familiar with. However, you do not have to explain the entire thing in details. That's where you can actually cut short your email. You don't have to mention that. You can just simply mention a key word, a key technique or something, but do not have to go through the details of what you know, how you know, and all those things. It is more important to focus on the papers that they have published, what your scientific thinking is, or what your understanding is, and how further you can proceed with the questions that they are trying to answer. So try not to explain in details the techniques. This is completely redundant. Your CV will anyway do that job. Furthermore, it is very important that you are honest. Now you have to show, and you have to show it to multiple people, that you are genuinely interested in joining the group. Try to project that you might not, that particular research group might not be your first priority or your second priority. It might be your 10th or 20th priority. However, you need to show that this is the group that you want to join. This is the ultimate group that I want to join, and you should project that in your writing, in the email. And furthermore, next is additional tips. So you should always focus on groups whose techniques or the broad area of interests align with your acquired skill set. For example, if you have worked, because I'm a biologist, so I'll give a biology example, but feel free to add in more examples when we go to the interactive session. Okay, so my skill set was mostly molecular biology and developmental biology. I had done my internship in developmental biology, as well as uh, a part of my master's project also was in developmental biology. So I tried to write to groups who were a part of a developmental biology team. So usually the techniques in a broad area is usually similar. So I knew certain techniques like Drosophila genetics. I was very good at it. And I applied to lab which worked on Drosophila genetics. I applied to labs which worked on cell culture and how cells can differentiate into different types of tissues. And that is why I knew certain things that these labs were working on. So it is better if you write to those groups where your interest or your skill set align with what they are trying to address. It need not be exactly similar, But if there is some kind of similarity, it makes it better. Your chances of getting at least an interview call increases tenfold. Next, if you already have a fellowship like DBT Net for India, scholarship like DAD, it boosts your chances of acquiring interview calls at least. You might not get selected, but if you already have a fellowship, especially for a foreign country, it is beneficial for you. Next, you might lack work experience. So, freshers usually lack work experience. So, in that case, you can wait. You do not have to immediately start your PhD because everyone else, all of your peers, are starting their PhDs. It is better that you go for internships and RA jobs if you're interested in a particular field, like suppose neurosciences or something like that. Try to find a lab where a neuroscience lab, try to learn some techniques there and then go for and then apply for a PhD program. It is absolutely fine if you try to garner work experience before you apply for a PhD program. It always helps. It also gives you clarity. If you want to stick to that field, you might like something on paper, but when you start doing the actual bench work, you find it boring or you think that it is not suited to your taste or your ability. So it's always good to go for internships, to do some RA jobs before you apply for a PhD program in a particular field. Next, mention the things that you are not familiar with as well, at least in one line. There would be thousands and thousands of techniques, a lot of papers, a lot of different angles that a question is being addressed in the papers as well. You don't necessarily have to understand it all. You don't have to know all the techniques. It is good if you can mention, at least in one sentence, the things or the techniques that you aren't familiar with, the ones that you are familiar with, and show that you're willing to learn, that you can be a fast learner. You'll pick up, you know the theory, at least mention that. And that you will be able to contribute after learning the things that you aren't familiar with. That is a very positive aspect. You don't have to explain everything. just go just talk about very briefly what you are familiar with, what you are good at, and what you aren't familiar as well. Finally, in the concluding remarks, it is good if you can add your soft skills, like the ability to interact with other people. If you have mentored someone in your masters or when you were doing an RA-ship or whatever, just mention that you can mentor people, or maybe you can solve problems quickly. Like, for example, ordering of stuff in India, it is a hassle. We all know that it is a hassle to order reagents, and if you have contributed in those aspects, in managerial aspects, in organizational aspects, to mention that also in your concluding remarks. Finally, publications are of course an advantage. If you want to stay in academia specifically, publications really help, especially in a graduate program. However, it is not a mandate. If you do not have a publication, it doesn't mean that you won't get selected. Your ability to think coherently, ask the right questions, proposing logical solutions play a more important role, specifically when you are writing an email. So that is why I said that you need to mention a couple of papers that the research group has published. You need to talk about what exactly, like a very specific set of questions that particularly interested you, or a set of techniques that you were really fascinated with, and how you can form better questions or further questions to progress the field and propose some logical solutions that would definitely help in your in the way you present an email. So try to do that. This comes under the body, but again, a research proposal in can be a separate entity altogether. But if you have to summarize your research proposal in 2 or 3 lines, try to do that in that email. Furthermore, another thing that you can do here, because you have to keep everything concise, you can draft down everything that you want to say in a separate email or in a notebook or in your laptop, whatever. Just write down everything that you want to say. Now, slowly and slowly, you start concising it as per what you, as per the introduction, as per your skill set, as per the interests, as per the research group, papers, etc., and so on. So first, start with a very, very, very big email or a very, very, very big like essay. Don't send that, of course. But once you have done that, now sit and try to concise it further. Next, this is very important, and you have to keep in mind that very few people, no matter how good your email is, will reply back. Most do not even see the email. In most cases, the emails go to spam also. So don't be disheartened. If you do not get a reply, it is completely fine. It doesn't mean that you are bad or your email was bad, that you put a lot of effort, but still it didn't work out. It will happen. In that case, you just have to keep writing more. Just keep increasing your sample size. Out of the 1,000 emails you send, maybe 10 will reply back, out of which 8 will be negative comments and perhaps 2 will be positive. 1 at least will call you for an interview. So try to increase your sample size if you want to apply to Germany or to other parts of Europe, UK, and so on. So that's it. Thank you. And for more information or question, if we run out of time today, you can reach us on phdsofIndia@gmail.com or on Twitter, Instagram, or any other social media platform. So now we'll come to questions. I'll stop sharing and we can take questions. So Vikashini has asked, what should be the subject line for email? It depends. If you are applying for an RA position, you can write prospective student willing to join as an RA, or willing to apply for a PhD position, something of that sort. Just write that you are applying for a PhD position, or you are applying for an internship, or you are applying for a RA-ship, or whatever. Just mention in brief in the subject line. That should do. Any more questions? You can type it. And if there are questions on the YouTube, can somebody please type the questions here as well?
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for the session. So I would like to ask, suppose there is a open position that advertised in some of the website. So we should do the emailing part when there is this open position thing also, to reach out the professor first.
Yeah, sure. If there is an open position already mentioned, you can always write to the professor that you came across this particular ad and you think you would be a good fit for the lab, and specify in the body what you know, what they want, what is there in the job description and how you fulfill those description. You don't have to know everything. If you at least know 50 or 60%, if you are familiar with it, it's always good. So of course, when there is a job position already open, it is an advantage actually. You should write for those positions. I hope I answered that.
Yeah. And one more question, I heard you have to mail according to their time zone, morning time, you have to shoot the email at that time. So you have to schedule the email before. So is it that necessary?
Usually, no. Of course, you should not email on a weekend for sure. That will get lost. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to write in their time zone. No, that's not important.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question here. Do we have to send both the CV and cover letter or even the SOP? Because I've heard that sending research proposal is a good thing. In your first email, it is usually not required. You don't have to write a research proposal, at least in the first email. You can only send your CV. If they reply back and they want that you send a research proposal, like a proper research proposal, then only you can do it. In the first email, a CV should be good enough. Should we attach a cover letter also along with the CV? No, it is not required. Your cover letter is actually in your email itself in that case, in this case. Any more question? Okay. Does the postdoc also can be got through email, or are there any other procedure for postdoc? Postdocs are usually you have to email. Wherever it is, you have to email, you have to write to the groups mostly. But in order to apply for a postdoc position, your publications are mandatory. Just remember that if you're applying for a postdoc position, and you can also meet people through conferences, talk to them, that is also fine. But a postdoc always usually works through emails. When is the best time to send an email for PhD positions during the admission cycle? So at least for Germany and other parts of Europe, apart from UK, there is no such best time. You can write to them whenever you want to. Like I mentioned briefly, that in Germany, supervisors usually get grants which keep coming almost throughout the year. Several different kinds of grant, they keep getting it. So it doesn't matter when you are applying. If you are just lucky that you apply, that you write to them when they have just received a grant or are looking for people, it might just click there. But there is no specific time for UK, of course. So when the graduate program starts, I think there is a fall session as well as a summer session as well. I don't remember the months, but yeah, you should first look at the graduate programs for UK as well as for the US, when the application begins and when it closes. You should plan the emails accordingly. What should we write in a cover letter, or is there a requirement of cover letter at all? In your first email, it is not required, or cover letter is not required. And what we should include in a cover letter, we'll cover that in probably next series. Yeah. Graduate programs are mentioned to refrain from contacting professors directly before applying. Yes. So for US, this is specifically important that you don't write to professors before applying to the graduate program. But for UK, sometimes it is actually beneficial, especially for the big institutes like Cambridge, Oxford, Kings. So you can write to the professors once, just asking if they particularly have an open PhD position. So a graduate program also doesn't necessarily mean that all the people, all the principal investigators in that particular program have open PhD positions. Some might not take PhD students in at that during that year, in that particular season. So you can always write to them asking if they have an open position that at that in that period. Is it true that mostly students from ITs, ISERs, NITs, IISc get interview calls or selected for PhD outside of India? I cannot give that stat. I'm sorry. If it is mentioned to refrain, should we follow that? You should apply to the graduate program first. Just apply for the graduate program, do the application, and then you can write to the professor. If they say before applying, so just apply and then write. How is your experience with cold emailing? Can you share your experience and was it helpful? So in my case, I didn't do much of cold emailing. Like I said, I focused very specifically on a very particular area of interest. I said developmental biology, but there was a specific part of developmental biology that I was interested in, and I only focused on those labs. So it was actually easy for me to curate the emails because I knew a lot of the studies that were going on in that field. So I don't have experience with cold, like nobody emails me, I don't hire people, but I did not do much of cold emailing actually. No, you don't need to ask for a response. Actually, you can just write that waiting eagerly for your response or something. And if they don't reply back, it is okay if you just do a follow-up email 1 week or 1.5 weeks later, just to follow up. and maybe they had seen your email and they have just forgotten to reply back to you. So in that case, a follow up email after a week should be good. But if they don't reply back to that also, then just leave it and move on to the next person. This session is actually recorded. It will be there on YouTube. We'll make it public. Right now, I don't think it is public, or maybe it is, but it will be there in our YouTube channel. Should we emphasize writing to an old professor or a younger one? I heard that young professors can cooperate with you more during your PhD, but on the other hand, a highly experienced professor can lead you to getting sufficient grants. This completely depends on the professor himself or herself. There is some old professors are really open-minded, some young professors are very inexperienced, so it works both ways. This is a very relative question. There is no like correct answer to this question. You should always write to people where your the work whose work really interests you, or whose work you are familiar with, or something that is very something that you know. Basically, that will help you. It doesn't matter if the professor is old, young. It can always happen that a very good professor might not be good for you per se as an individual. So it is an individualistic criterion, I would say. Yeah. Any further question? How should we approach foreign professors of Ivy League? So for Ivy League, emails don't work, like I said. So you have to apply through a graduate program. After, if you get selected, then you apply, then you go through. For even for Oxford and Cambridge, which I don't think are considered Ivy Leagues, but yeah, the top institutes, even there, you can, after application, you can maybe write an email to the people you are interested to work with, but that part is mostly graduate school. If the graduate school likes your application, you might get through. Yeah. Okay, I want to ask how the first email should be. Like if I want to learn certain skill from them, their university or department laboratory. Yeah, so your first email should be, you should again introduce yourself. You should ask what your specific need is, why you need to learn this particular technique. And it is important that this email is actually written by your supervisor or whoever your professor is at that point of time. But if that is not the case, so you can always write to them saying that this is something that you would like to learn and why you want to learn it, of course, why you want to learn it, how it is going to help, and if there is a possibility that you can come and maybe perhaps do an internship of 2 months or so in order to learn that certain skill. Can freshers just past MSc get PhD opportunities, or we should do project assistantship? Sometimes they do get, if you are good enough, like good enough in the sense that if you can justify, if you know how to read papers, how to write, how to have a like clear understanding of what the work is, and if you can come up with brief proposal on this is something that you would like to work on, sometimes it works. But in most cases, it is better if you have some experience, specifically for Germany and other places where the PhD duration is actually very small and there is not enough time for other people to actually train you. So in those cases, it really helps if you have experience. But yeah, fresh pass out MSCs do get PhD positions, at least in India, in the US, in the UK as well. The graduate program, it's through the graduate program. If your application is good enough, you'll get through. Any more question? If you have questions, you can always come to us later. You can always email us or drop a message on any of our social media platforms. We'll try to address them as well. And this is not the only session that we are conducting. After a couple of months we will revisit this again. And if you also have suggestions, please feel free to speak up. If you think that I have missed some point and I should have said that and I did not, you can always add that as well. No more questions. Okay. If we find difficulty in curating an email, can we approach you? Yeah, sure. I would be happy to look at your emails. I might not be able to reply as soon as possible, like not very fast sometimes, but I will try to. If I can tell you where you need to work upon, I can definitely do that. If there are no more questions, can people just introduce themselves? Because I know that there were some PhDs, but most people aren't PhDs and probably are looking for PhDs. So if at some point people can start introducing themselves, unmute yourself and introduce yourselves. Oh, we have another question. How to pick professors for emailing other than research interests, like country-wise or university-wise or research group-wise? Any personal suggestions? I would say you should stick to people with similar research interests. Yeah, it might not. There is always a possibility that it might not work out. The people you apply to, the people who select you might not be compatible with you, but it is always better, I think, if you stick to your research interests. That's my personal suggestion. In that case, there is higher chances of you getting selected, or at least getting the interview calls. Any more questions? Do people want to introduce themselves? At least some of you, come on. For postdoc application, is there any special thing we need to focus? Postdoc, we can do a separate session on that, because I personally didn't do a postdoc. So I decided like maybe somebody else whom I know would give a separate session on a postdoc application, because yes, there are certain things that you must focus on when you are applying for a postdoc. It is much more complicated, not complicated I would say, but it needs to be much more precise, much more scientifically accurate, I would say, all those things. So we'll do a session on that separately.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Uh, I'm Sachin. I'm doing my PhD from
yeah.
University of Hyderabad.
Hi, Sachin. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know you. We have talked
Yes, ma'am.
before. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Nice to meet you. I hope you got some insights. I hope it was helpful.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Anybody else wants to speak up?
Hello, ma'am. I'm audible.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm Nitip Joshi. I'm pursuing my master's degree in biotechnology from Symbiosis International University in Pune. So it
Okay.
was a really enlightening session. So I'm actually personally planning to pursue my PhD in Germany. Although
Okay.
I'm not specially specific to Germany, but more of Europe per se,
Yeah.
because I'm more into virology and bacteriophages.
Okay.
So like the labs catering to my research topics are they're not less, but they're also not as wide as my group of approaching professors and all is like less. So like, but your session actually quite helped me a lot to like overall design, because I might not be directly applying from this year. I may be looking for a RA position somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but like yeah, so that is what's happening in my head right now. But like I saw your this advertisement for this webinar on LinkedIn, so I thought I should connect to you because I follow you there. So
Okay, sure,
So
sure.
yeah.
If you need any help, you can come to me. There are times when I don't reply back because I'm busy or have just
Yes.
forgotten. Happens. I'm
Yes.
sorry if that has happened with anyone here, but I will try to if you need help. And yeah, just apply for an RA position if you can. It is always good to learn more skills, then it also increases your chances. It also opens up more areas. It need not be virology. After a certain point, you might think something else is more interesting. So can happen. So you should keep your mind open, options open as well. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening.
Hi. Good evening. Good evening, Vikas.
Yeah, I'm Vikashni. So I completed my master's in biotechnology long back, and now I'm planning to apply for PhD abroad. And as he told, like I'm also trying for European countries.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience is completely in molecular biology
Okay.
aspect of, but I was working in plant biotechnology field.
Okay.
But since I completed my postgraduate, I was more interested in cancer biology.
Okay.
But then I didn't get an opportunity to work in cancer
Mm-hmm.
biology field. So, but when I apply for abroad, I'm just planning to shift the field.
Yeah,
Uh,
if you're shifting the field, you should at least keep in mind that any place that you're applying to, there needs to be at least 50 to 60% of the techniques or the
Techniques.
concepts that you know, that you are familiar with, that you can justify, that you know. Because for European countries, that's one of the most important criterion, that they look for people, they hire people with experience, with prior experiences. It's not
Okay.
it's not such for US or any program that goes through a graduate school. There it is more about how much you scored, if you have publications, if your SOP research proposal are awesome, like out of the world or something. But for specifically where in Germany, in these European countries where the time frame is short, it is important that you can justify that at least there are like 50 to 60% of the techniques, the concepts that you already know, and nobody has to hold your hand and teach everything from the beginning, because nobody will do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the thank you
Thank
for the
you.
suggestion.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much. Yeah. Okay, so thank you, people. And we'll send out a feedback form maybe today or tomorrow. We'll request you to please fill that form. And we'll keep coming up with sessions like this every week, hopefully. Small sessions, and we'll repeat these sessions again once in a while. We'll revisit again. So you can, whenever you are free, please feel free to join. And I'll see you next week, hopefully. Yeah. And
Thank
thank
you,
you
ma'am.
so much. Thank you so much for joining today.